My name is Fran Rosenfeld, and I'm one of the curators of This is New York. And I'm going to talk about first a 1925 drawing by Victor Simon Perard called Moths. And it's actually the first object, the first image that you see when you walk into this gallery. We're in Destination NYC, and it's a drawing by Perard of an intersection at Times Square, and it shows a group of high society folks flying toward and lunging toward this giant electric globe. And they have wings. It's a wonderful comment on high society and nightlife and sort of bright lights, big city moment in the 1920s, what Times Square was like in its day. And it has a satirical edge, but I picked it as an opening image for a sequence about how Times Square has for over 100 years been a source of fascination and commentary and observation for all different kinds of visual artists. It's not just another cityscape of Times Square, of which there are millions. Times Square is probably one of the most overrepresented places in New York City, not to say the world. I think it's a striking drawing. The perspective, the verticality of the drawing, it's not a traditional horizontal cityscape or landscape. It's a stark black and white vertical drawing with very exaggerated diagonal perspective, looking from a rooftop down onto the city streets. Was extremely stylish and striking. I learned a little bit more about Victor Simon Perard. He was born in France, but he emigrated to the United States, where for many years he had a long career as an artist, an illustrator, and an author, who even contributed some drawings to Jacob Riis's How the Other Half Lives. He was capturing some of the city's, most crowded, depressing kind of tenements. And then 25 years later, we have this illustration from him catching this glamorous district of Times Square, which in the 1920s, Times Square, believe it or not, was considered kind of the heart of New York nightlife. It was still seen as a glamorous place, and it was seen as maybe one of the most modern, exciting, strange places in the urban world, certainly in America. He captured a whole gamut of things in city life, so I thought it was just fascinating to have this one glimpse through his eyes of what was going on in the city in the 20s. The next object I chose is a painting by Jane Dixon, and it's called Paradise Alley, and it's from 1983. So this is something created almost 60 years later, but not more than about a block and a half from the first view. Jane Dixon is a painter and also a photographer and a mosaicist who has had a long and fascinating career capturing different aspects of New York City. She moved to Times Square and lived there herself in 1979. From her 6th floor window, painted the streetscape of what she saw below. As many people know, Times Square was in a very different place than it was 60 years earlier in the 20s. It had really fallen to a very low point. It was definitely no longer the center of glamour and high society and fashion. Then it became the red light district and notorious for its pornographic and sex shops and the sex trade that was practiced there. And this is a painting, an oil on vinyl painting that she did, which shows one of the many small clubs in her area that was called Paradise Alley. A completely urban image, which is all about, urban life and the human world with almost no people in it. This kind of lonely, eerie, neon lit nightscape of the city. The painting makes you think about the kind of things that happen in these spaces, makes you wonder what's going on. She was capturing the reality of all the other people who made their lives either living or working, visiting Times Square, and tried to capture something of the daily reality of this extremely strange district in the city, while also keeping it kind of infused with a sort of menace and mystery. I also found it visually incredibly compelling, and the colors are so saturated. It's a sort of strangely beautiful painting. The light is this artificial neon. Jane Dixon, I've read, was particularly influenced by Japanese ukiyo-e prints and also Chinese landscape painting in a loose way, is borrowing some of that perspective and applying it to this completely tawdry, quotidian landscape of the city. We borrowed it from Jane Dixon and her gallery, the Karma Gallery. They packed it up in their warehouse and shipped it here, and we are lucky enough to have it on view for the entire length of the exhibition. We're not only talking about the places themselves in New York City, we're super interested in them, but what we're really interested in is how have artists, painters, illustrators, filmmakers, how have they seen them? It's so clear that 60 years apart, these two artists are bringing a very individual, thoughtful, knowing point of view to this very unusual part of New York City. I mean, Times Square has got to be the most extreme, strange place. It's perennially lit. It's never dark. This epicenter for all kinds of commerce and entertainment. That's what artists do, getting beyond this idea of just a capture, a representation of the city, and thinking about, but what are the other elements, and how does it become a conversation with the viewer, and how does it become a reflection of the artist's feelings and thoughts about the place that they're capturing.